This episode of the Agile Uprising podcast is brought to you by vGroup Digital. vGroup Digital provides native cloud-based software development services on iOS, Android, web, Mac, and Windows, as well as enterprise product development, maintenance, and support. vGroup Digital is led by a team of Agile practitioners who believe in collaboration, constant feedback, and delivering the highest value at all times. Visit www.vgroupdigital.com for more info and mention the Agile Uprising podcast to get up to 15% off all development services.
This is the Agile Uprising podcast.
Welcome to the Agile Uprising podcast. On tonight's podcast, we'll be discussing the role of the Scrum Master. Ryan, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. Ryan Lockard. I'm a Philadelphia-based software development manager. I work with multiple Scrum teams, worked in multiple different Agile roles, and I'm excited to talk today about the Scrum Master role.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Troy?
Yes, my name is Troy Lightfoot. I'm an Agile coach based out of New Jersey. I've been a Scrum Master for many years and transitions to coach role. So I'm also excited to talk about the Scrum Master. I think this is has been a hotly debated topic on the coalition. So.
It's a good conversation starter. Jay?
And last but not least, I'm Jay Hrcsko. I am a Philadelphia-based software professional. I've done time as a project manager, Scrum Master, and an Agile change agent. And right now I'm acting as a senior project manager, helping to plan an Agile transition. So I'm curious to see how that plays into the whole role of a Scrum Master. Are they a coach? Are they not a coach? And we're going to have some good dialogue.
Yeah, it should be definitely interesting. And I'm Andrew Leff. I'm an Agile coach outside and sort of based in the Philadelphia area, but travel everywhere. So I am excited to be discussing this topic since I've worked with a lot of different Scrum Masters. So we're going to just jump into the first topic here. So as soon as I can find it.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to just jump in and start talking about what actually, like, from the pure sense, what does it mean when they say Scrum Master, right? Like,
right.
The Scrum Guide, or if you go to a training, what the hell does the Scrum Master role mean?
So I have the Scrum Guide in front of me, so I'll pick a few things out of here I can read. Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring Scrum is understood and enacted. Scrum Master is a servant leader to the team. He helps those outside the Scrum team understand which of the interactions with the Scrum team are helpful and which aren't. And the Scrum Master helps everyone change these interactions to maximize the value created by the Scrum team. So there are three things in the Scrum Guide that is listed for the Scrum Master. Scrum Master service to the product owner, Scrum Master service to the development team, and the Scrum Master service to the organization. And there's kind of bullet points for each one. So basically he's a servant leader to all three, and he interacts with all three seemingly on a daily basis. I think we're going to talk about that soon too.
So I think we'd be wasting our breath if we argue with that, since it comes straight from the Scrum Guide.
Yeah, no. So I think this is good, right? So we sort of know the guidelines, let's say, or sort of the characteristics. So I'd be curious from your guys' experience, how many of those characteristics have you, or what sort of Scrum Masters have you worked with in your experience, in your breadth of work, that you've actually encountered someone that possesses all those?
So I think one thing that's like contextually important is the nature of the organization you're working in, right? So if you're working in a multinational, huge group, what it means when it says the Scrum Master service to the organization is going to have different degrees and different weights to it. But I've seen Scrum Masters excel in some parts of this, and I've seen very few Scrum Masters excel in all areas. Quite often, without sounding too harsh, I think for the most part, the Scrum Master seems to get a laser focus on the team. and assume by serving the team that they're serving the product owner and the larger organization. And the really transcendent ones are the ones that realize that the role does go above and beyond that. So I'm not sure if Jay, you've spent some time in the role. What did you see when you were acting in that position?
I think you hit it spot on. There is not necessarily do you see a lot of Scrum Masters who have all those different, that depth and breadth, for lack of a better term. But I will say that a lot of times you're correct. Scrum Masters get pigeonholed into worrying only about the team. And yes, they're a servant leader, but they get very, very almost marginalized to, oh, well, you're just a Scrum Master owning team XYZ. And that's what their focus then becomes. And it takes a real mature organization to let them help grow and be a servant to the org, a servant to the greater group, a servant to the greater vertical. I've seen really transformative Scrum Masters. I've seen guys that can do all the different levels. I've seen newer guys that are still, if we were going to use the shoe-ha-re, they're shoe guys. They're still feeling their way around. If we had an engagement where we were in the same building and we ate sort of the same thing, do you think I'm characterizing our last gig pretty well with guys who were not marginalized, but forced into a strictly defined box?
Yeah, and I think you both touch on an interesting point around sort of the organization understanding of what a Scrum Master is. And it's not just the Scrum Master, it's creating that role and, what that role entails and allowing that creativity within that role to blossom as opposed to being, hey, this is your checkbox, you can only do X, Y, and Z. And I had an interesting experience recently where I was working in an organization, had 9 teams, coaching 9 teams, and I would have to fill in when any of the Scrum Masters were out on vacation for any extended period of time. And it really gave me great insight as to sort of moments for me to help empower the Scrum Masters to improve on their skill. And it was interesting because some of them were just, and I use this term loosely, became almost glorified admins. The team was really allowed the team to push them around to the point where they were not helping the team improve at all. So there was no sort of, hey, this is I'm giving you insight as to how to improve, and all you are doing is just basically steamrolling me and dictating what I should and shouldn't do within the team, which I thought was actually really interesting. And none of them that were allowing that to happen handled it very well. So it was very disruptive when I went in there and I was doing all the ceremonies for their team, since it was completely a different tone. I tend to be a little too assertive in stand-ups, and that's feedback that I received when I'm doing Scrum Master roles. I'm very direct, very assertive. I really believe in the 15-minute time box. I really think it's important, and for me, that's an important characteristic.
So why don't you walk us through then, like, as a well-rounded, well-empowered Scrum Master working in an organization that embraces the role, what does that day look like then? I mean, you're starting with the stand-up. Why don't you just step us through what a strong Scrum Master's day looks like?
That could be a dangerous topic. I don't know if I want to answer that first.
Well, no, then whoever wants to jump on it, and if nobody does, I'm sure I'll go meandering through it myself.
Troy, give it a shot. You do more of the coaching and instructional stuff. Give us your take.
Well, this kind of, it might lead into another discussion, but the idea of a Scrum Master as a coach. But at least I approached it that way personally. So anything from, a Scrum, one of the things the Scrum Master does is remove impediments, right? That's one of his responsibilities. So I can give you an example of an impediment that maybe you might not think about, but working with distributed teams could be something realistic. One impediment, obviously, is time zones. So figuring out how to get teams to communicate working in different time zones, that's one thing that a Scrum Master can do. Another thing is, I'll give an example. So I was working with a team in India, in Pune, India, and I come in at 9 a.m., right? And they normally stay till about noon Eastern. So I work with this particular team in the morning about 3 hours on average. So I come in and I get a message on Slack, and it says, Troy, you can't get on the call, and we have no lights and no power, and it's 100 degrees, and we're coding without internet, and all these things, right? And I'm like, okay, and we're getting eaten up by mosquitoes. Okay, great. So that's one. Now, I'm like, well, guys, first question is, and I have to ask you, how come you just didn't go home? That's one question. Because this is a small office. So everyone in the office, it's about 12 people. So in this particular office, so how come you didn't go home and work? So that led into another discussion later. But they said, well, no one told us we could go home. So now, as a Scrum Master, that is something else I have to address, is that, having the teams be self-organized and empowered, right? So that's one. But the immediate impediment is, how can I get this to where this doesn't happen again in this office? So that is not something that has anything to do with the Scrum process, not something that has to do with coaching. That's just, I have to go now to someone up in the company and say, we need to get this resolved, whatever it takes. So it ended up being, two things happened. One, they ended up buying a much bigger generator, a backup generator. And the next thing is they actually ended up getting a different office. So that would have less power. So that is an example of an impediment that I come in the morning, I have no idea what my job is going to be as far as every day. It's kind of a role of a Scrum Master.
I think one thing you touched on there is obviously a big aspect is the impediment removal, or at least impediment mitigation. I know, Jay, you mentioned you guys are gearing up for an Agile transformation. And one thing I noticed that really good Scrum Masters do is, we all know the 3 questions that you ask in the daily Scrum. What have you done? What are you planning to do? And do you have any impediments? And 9 times out of 10, I have no impediments is the verbal baton that we pass for the next person to start talking. When you have a team that's newly embracing Scrum or newly embracing Agile, they see that as that handoff. Really good Scrum Masters don't accept that, and they start trying to solve the mystery of what impediments do they have that they're not willing to speak up about, because there's a whole lot of change going on as you're going through a transformation, or if you're new into Scrum, because if I say I have an impediment, that's an indictment on me as a person, right? So as they're growing into that safety role, or that safety zone within the new teams, great Scrum Masters dig in deep. They get themselves into the pulse of the team, and they help understand, oh, you only did 1 code commit in the last 3 days. Why? What's going on? They 5-why their way through the problems. I'm not sure what other people are seeing there, but I think that's a great tell of a strong Scrum Master, someone that's not willing to accept I have no impediments, right?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring that up, because I think of it similar, but I also think I have to correlate everything to almost like real life. So to me, the Scrum Master is the parent. So you're playing both, the nurturing parent and the disciplinarian, and you have to know when to use those skills. And then as well as you need to be able to allow the team, it's almost like a pick your own adventure book. So the team is going to pick, to go down the road at pick page, go to 47, but that's a dead end. So they shouldn't pick that. But sometimes you got to let them pick that so they can feel what failure feels like, or making the wrong decision feels like, so they know sort of there is an impact there. And I feel like when you take on too much as a Scrum Master to direct the team in the right direction all the time, they don't get empowered to make better decisions, because they constantly have someone leading them where they should be reflecting on sort of how they are operating as a team. And the Scrum Master as a guide has to make certain decisions, whether they should be stepping in or should be just sort of observing. That's just solely my opinion. When I've seen more effective Scrum Masters have been very interactive, but also willing to sit on the sideline and watch to observe.
I think I got hung up when you said that the Scrum Master is the disciplinarian. But as I listened a little bit more, I think I understand where you're going with that. It's interesting. Troy made a comment earlier on about maybe having some debate that was going on about the Scrum Master as coach, and I'll be the first one to jump in and say I think he's referring to me, because Troy and I have had multiple conversations about this, and I I think sometimes I was just being antagonistic to get a rise out of the gentleman. But I mean, Leff, I think you were hitting on it as well, man. Like, it's your toe in that line between listening and talking, right? Between being a coach and being a consultant. And I agree, Troy. Just to be honest with you, I do think that the Scrum Master is an Agile coach to the team, the product owner, and the organization. The argument that I was making in the past was just to be an effective Scrum Master for a team, the level of coaching that some organizations need far exceeds what a Scrum Master can do, depending on how big they are, how dysfunctional they are, and how many people there are.
Sure.
So I think there's different layers to coaching, which is a probably different show altogether. But I think the Scrum Master is 100% an Agile coach, just with different areas and gravities of impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree further. I mean, my last engagement, I came from a place where we rolled out Agile, and we had some Scrum Masters that were good at getting the team to coalesce and to get them to gel. I mean, I look at the role, the question is a Scrum Master coach? Well, yeah, I look at the Scrum Master, to use a cliche sports analogy, as a floor general, the point guard on the basketball team, right? He's directing traffic. He's making sure everybody's running the right plays, doing the right things they have to do, getting the right play run so we can score a point, making sure that they're talking about their impediments. To your point, Ryan, where you said, a good Scrum Master will find a way to wheedle that out. A great Scrum Master will also coach a team to get them to unify into this consistent piece. So when they cross that bridge and they tip over, right? Then you see that they're over communicating. Well, I don't have an actual impediment, but I'm a little concerned about this because I have this going on. We're relying on the shared service guys, and they're a little bit behind the 8 ball. That's where the coaching comes in, because they not only learn how to elicit the right feedback, but they learn how to see those things coming, and to get the introvert who's not very communicative, to get them to feel comfortable to open up and talk about what's actually on their mind. Yeah, the facilitation skills are it is a life journey. If you think you're a strong facilitator, you don't know what a facilitator is yet. You gotta keep sharpening that knife until it gets to a razor's edge, then start all over.
So it's a good point about facilitation, that, we're talking about stand-ups and impediments, but if you flip it to the end, like if we fast forward to the end, to me, the retro at that point is a really critical exercise that I think is done very poorly in a lot of organizations that I've worked at. It's the forgotten, we don't really need to do this. We can just let this go. And to me, it's a critical sort of point, sanity check. And a good Scrum Master, although they're not responsible per se, should be able to facilitate a really good retro.
So I have a comment about that. I think the retro, all the meetings are important and they all have their own value. But I think if the one meeting that you cannot skip is the retrospective, because once you do that, you lose your ability to be agile, to be empirical. I mean,
and I agree with you, Troy, 100%. Yeah. My experience, unfortunately, let's say 3 of your teams are failing their sprint. The retro is the first thing to go. It's just sort of the unfortunate nature of how the organizations that I've been in have handled the retro.
But I mean, how can you really improve so you don't fail again without the retro?
I totally agree. I'm just saying that unfortunately, in my situations, through my experience, the Scrum Masters haven't been effective in combating that sort of organizational downforce.
Okay.
That could be a whole different conversation. But I think if, let's say we are doing the retro, I think that is important to show value. So a good Scrum Master could combat that by saying, here's the feedback. If we scale this retro, here's all the feedback that I've been getting that in actuality is really important to the organization, not just to the team. So we're filtering out some of the team dynamic, and we're saying that, you know what, the environment's down 27 times and we can't deploy code, and whatever the obstacles are, or this team isn't ready, so we're sitting on our hands waiting. This type of feedback to the organization is huge. And if you're skipping out on that, or you're not able to facilitate that conversation and be able to strip that content out, you're losing out on a really huge opportunity.
I'm happy you brought this up, Leff, because literally in my notes, there are two things that I have written under what makes an effective Scrum Master. The second one was just that. Being able to run thought-provoking retrospectives. Quite often that is an afterthought oversight. And of the teams that do have retros every sprint, they seem to have stale retros. And I think that is a giant disservice to what makes Scrum beautiful. It's the ability to inspect and adapt. And if you're not getting engaged feedback and you're not taking meaningful action from your retrospectives, what the hell is the point in doing it, right? You're just wasting not only your time, but a lot of company resources to run an ineffective meeting. Not to give Andy Leff too many more shout-outs because he gets quite enough on this podcast series, but Andy Leff is somebody that really takes the retrospective meaningfully. And I know I've had multiple conversations with him when I talk about how do you run them. And the guy has about 100 different answers. It's beautiful when you watch somebody that knows how to facilitate a room and how to maximize the value of a team, talk about the way that they elicit feedback and they create an engaging retro. It's awesome. It's something it's beautiful to watch happen.
And I'm going to just throw something out there just to embarrass Ryan, but Leff and Clef sound a lot the same. So it's actually Andy Clef and I'm Andrew Leff. So I want to give the shout out to the correct person.
The Agile Uprising, we have more Andys than you.
I know.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry.
They're all pragmatic.
It is Andy Clef. I will try very hard never to give you a compliment, Mr. Leff.
Yeah.
Which one's dogmatic and which one's pragmatic?
Here we go. That's another podcast.
So one thing that I think is interesting, we were talking on the Agile Uprising Coalition in one of the different posts about a Scrum Master that has the authority to hire and fire. And I know that myself as a manager, I know Andrew Leff was mentioning he had to step in when some of his Scrum Masters were out. I've done the same in the past, and when I'm doing that, typically I'm on a team where I am the direct, organizational manager for the people that are on the team, albeit for a short engagement. I'll be stepping in that place, and it is awkward as hell, man. I don't like it. I don't know that the team necessarily likes it. I'm curious what you guys think of having a Scrum Master that has some type of organizational authority over the teams.
So this came from I was doing a Scrum Master training, and one of the questions was about this, and that's kind of where it came from on the coalition side because it got into a debate with me and the person. And his point, I understood his point. His point was at a small company, right? You may not have the resources to have dedicated Scrum Masters, right? And so if you have a manager role and someone wants to become a Scrum Master, for the company, it makes financial sense, particularly if it's not a large company, right? But then we had a philosophical debate about, why you shouldn't do that. And my kind of pushback was particularly, let's say the retrospective is a perfect example of that. How open are people going to be about their mistakes and about the things they're struggling with if the person that can fire them is sitting right there and facilitating the meeting? So it creates conflicts.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's the whole point, or not the whole point, but an important point is the trust. The Scrum Master has to be trusted. The team has to trust that this individual has their back, that is willing to literally take all the bullets when they're needed, deflect what they need, give the team, push the team, empower the team, whatever they need to do, get the team coffee, clean the team's toilet, whatever. Literally, they have to trust that the Scrum Master is there for them and vice versa. So the Scrum Master has to trust that the team is going to do the right things as well, or communicate and be transparent about when they're not. So I think putting that power in the Scrum Master's hands is a bit of a challenge. I'm not sure that you can utilize it for good when you need to, and for evil when you don't. Or that conversation.
I think that I'm a big fan of good leadership, right? Like the old saying that people don't quit jobs; they quit managers. And if you're truly a great leader, I think a truly great leader could do both roles and succeed. They could have, if their team is confident in them, they'll be comfortable being open in a retro. They'll lay bare their faults. They'll lay bare their shortcomings, and the team can grow from it. However, I don't know the number of leaders I've met in my career versus the number of leaders that are truly transformative. It's not over 10%.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can name on one hand the guys I know who can manage a team and could step into the Scrum Master role simultaneously, and their team would respect them and give them the right, honest feedback and whatnot. So I wouldn't suggest it. That's a unique wrinkle that Troy brought up in a small type organization. You know, you don't have the headcount, you don't have the budget. How do you do that? I could see, I hate to be the pessimist, but I could see a lot more harm than good coming from having someone have the ability to write my review and fire me, as well as what did I do yesterday, what am I doing today, and what's my impediments.
See, I'm holding my tongue here because if the organization's that small, why do you need a manager? If you can't afford a Scrum Master, you probably don't need a manager. Just have them report to the VP.
True.
Yeah, and that's again. So it's really around, you know, truly putting the role and not bastardizing the role into something that it really shouldn't be.
Yep. And I guess to that point, I mean, I'll be full disclosure now. I have 3 teams right now in my group that are running Scrum, right? They're doing the Scrum framework to deliver value. And I have all 3 teams, the Scrum Master as a developer. Now, Scrum Guide says nothing about you cannot do this. It says the 3 to 9 head count excludes the Scrum Master and the product owner unless they are serving another function. So I think that leaves the door open, and I'm not actually violating the Scrum Guide, but I'll tell you what, it works for me. Curious what you guys think about that.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, Troy. So I'll be quick. I think that I think that you hit the nail on the head right there. It works for you. I think that it depends on the individual. I've worked with some developers that absolutely could not do that role. And then I've worked with some that are willing to sort of step out of that strict developer mindset and really encompass that role really well. But they've been more technical teams or more technically focused that have been, I guess, more technical team. When you're doing some of the business work, it sort of is challenged. So I almost enjoy sometimes having a Scrum Master that has some domain expertise from a business perspective.
Yeah.
So hybrid. But I think that it's me personally, I think it's an okay thing. If the person possesses the skill and whatever, it's one team. I like to do the exercise where no one has a title on the team. You're not a developer, you're not a QA, you're not a BA, you're not anything.
Right.
You're a team member. You're team member 1, you're team member number 2, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that not everyone goes for that, but I think that that's an effective way to sort of shatter some of those preconceived notions. But I know I stepped on Troy's conversation, so I'm going to kick it over to him.
Well, I guess no one's saying like you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. I mean, I don't think there's any rules, you know, is what I mean. But if you do read the Scrum Guide, and we'll go back to the beginning of this conversation. So I'm gonna read out a few things from the Scrum Guide. We're going to talk about Scrum Master, right? And leading and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption is one of the responsibilities. So if you have a developer who's being counted on to deliver code, right? Even just that one line, how much time and effort is he putting into that one line? Right? The next topic is planning Scrum implementations within the organization, helping employees and stakeholders understand and enact Scrum in an empirical product development, causing change that increases the productivity of the Scrum team. Well, of course you can do that. And working with other Scrum Masters to increase the effectiveness of the application of Scrum in the organization. So that's just one part of a Scrum Master's job, is the organizational part. And I think, forget the development team and the product owner part for this right now. So how effective can someone who's being counted on to be a developer and to work with other developers delivering working software, how effective can it be at the stuff I just said? I mean, that's one question I would have.
So Ryan, let me follow up with a question before you jump in. When I answered, or when you asked, is the developer a Scrum Master and developer, or are they just filling the Scrum Master role?
They both. they're writing code, and they're facilitating the team in the function of Scrum Master. And sure, to answer your question, it can be done. I genuinely see it every day. Now, the way that I look at the value that the team members are providing, it's not this person are they delivering enough value, right? Are they writing enough code? It's overall, is the team meeting the goals that they're setting for themselves, sprint in, sprint out? And is the team happy? Are they progressing? Are they getting more effective? Do we have attrition? Like any of those measurables that we can see. And I could tell you right now that this isn't a new experiment, something that's been going on for 2 or 3 sprints. The one has been in a Scrum Master position for about 52-week sprints. We're closing it on 2 years, and it is effective. Where these teams are slowly becoming the go-to example within my organization of how effective you can run agile teams without having that dedicated person anointed as Scrum Master. And I think one piece that is helpful to understand here too is Leff. Andrew Leff was talking about. He's seen it, but he's also it's usually on more technical teams. One thing that really helps most of the teams I'm referencing here out is that they have strong product owners that can bring that business perspective and bring the stakeholder view, so that they round off that highly technical view of the Scrum Master. So there's a nice dance that goes on between that technical perspective and the business perspective at the same time.
So I have one question for you, Ryan, then. Because we talked about the role of a Scrum Master is unpredictable from day to day, right? We kind of established that earlier a little bit.
Right.
So how do you, I have my own ways of doing it. I've worked in this scenario before. I'm not saying, that's what I mean. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying I've never worked with it. I'm just saying for me, if you can do it, have a dedicated Scrum Master, yes. But my question is, how do you handle capacity planning on your team for sprint planning for the Scrum Master role when the Scrum Master role, as we talked about, is unpredictable? So one way I've done it is do like 50% for that person. So assume that 50% of your time is not going to go to the development. So I was just curious of how you have done it.
So it's really hard for me to I'm the guy that doesn't like doing percents. Here's the thing: I trust the teams to figure it out themselves. They measure themselves in the retrospectives whether or not they're being effective or not. And if they're not being effective, I trust them to make the adjustments they need in their capacity and their plannings to correct.
Right. I guess when okay, so let's say you're working with a newer Scrum team who isn't at that level yet.
Right.
And you said, okay, well, one of you is going to be the Scrum Master. And so for me, I would go in and try to teach capacity planning, and because they're not even going to think about it at first, they're not used to it. So I guess my question is, what is your experience with that, with working with newer teams?
I wish I had a straight answer for you. They figure it out. They're complex machines, people, but they damn sure know how to solve a problem. Honestly, so here's the thing. My teams are the culture and the environment that I try to breed within my organization is one where you're allowed to be wrong. Like just, try to improve based upon your wrongness. And when you give the freedom to fail, people will experiment and they will actually come up with a better solution. So if I tell you 30% of some ambiguous number is what it takes, or 50% of some ambiguous number is what it takes, sure, do that. That's cool. If that makes you feel good. At the end of the day, we're going to be wrong. Just figure out how wrong we were and how to be less wrong next time.
I guess what I'm saying is, this is last I'll talk about this personally, but what I'm saying is, if the team is committing to this, right? If the team is committing to getting a certain amount of things done in the sprint, right?
Yep. And
if they're not honest about how much capacity they have to dedicate to this sprint, right, to each other, well, not to the Scrum Master, I mean to each other, right?
Yep.
Then, my opinion is especially for newer teams, they might be less successful, at least at the beginning, until they go through the empirical. Well, I guess what I'm saying is helping with capacity planning when it comes to this could help a newer team. That's my point.
So I'm gonna retract some of my statement from before. I thought that you were talking about a transition from a developer into a Scrum, like a dedicated Scrum Master, not doing both roles. So I think it almost falls back on, can the Scrum Master be a manager that has the ability to fire or have an impact to fire somebody or have the ability to do that. To what degree are we willing to sort of morph and be creative with the role, I guess, is the organizational's appetite for being able to have that. So depending upon how far you are in your journey, how adaptable you are, how willing you are to allow the team to fail, how willing the organization is to accept that, all play factors in. But I think, going down the purist route and not sort of the exception route, I think that it's a dedicated role. And I think it should probably, in my opinion, stay as a dedicated role until you're at a point where the team is trusted, operating, and doing that self-managing process. Then the Scrum Master becomes a little bit different. It morphs into, to me, a little bit of a different role.
I can share this too. I mean, this is just the program that I'm accountable for. There are other programs within my organization where they have dedicated Scrum Masters.
I mean, I hate to use the stereotypical Agile question answer, but it depends, right? And obviously it's working for Ryan. I mean, they have the right people with the right skill set who can swivel chair, for lack of a better term, and they can go back and forth and get their Scrum Master duties done and their developer duties done at a high rate, at a highly acceptable quality, on time. And it works for you guys, but I think, like everything else, there's probably developers that would try it and maybe not do so well. There's probably developers that would try and excel to the point where they should be Scrum Masters and not developers.
So actually that brings up a great point, Jay. Like, what have been the best, well, not the best, but anecdotally or empirically, what have you guys seen as far as waterfall type titles that best acclimate into a Scrum Master role?
I mean, well, I'll give you my example. If nobody minds, I go first. I came from a project manager background. The typical waterfall, PMP, PMBOK, 4-hour exam with 9,000 questions and Slack and float and all that nonsense. So your question is actually apropos of nothing because, or not even apropos of nothing. It's pertinent because I had a conversation with our PMO in my current organization the other day, and they said, well, we have so many project managers. We're looking to go Agile. What type of project managers make good Scrum Masters? And I responded with, they don't even have to be project managers. You need someone who's open-minded, who's enthusiastic, who has some level of cognition, right? Because they're going to have to swivel chair. They're going to have to multitask. Some semblance of management experience, not necessarily managing people as in approving timesheets and year-end reviews, but someone who knows the psychology behind leadership and knows how to deal with people. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're looking at a standard Agile team of 8 people, you're going to have 8 completely different personalities. Some are introverts, some are extroverts, some are completely obscene and obstinate like me, some are just go with the flow and quiet and make things happen. So it really does depend. But when I'm hiring, I look for guys who are confident without being cocky. I look for guys who are hungry. For me, it's more of a question of will than skill, because I can train you to do the job well, but I need you to have that internal fire to deliver, and that's what I look for.
Yeah, so I think that this is an interesting topic of discussion, to say the least. My experience has been a little bit different, I guess. I like Scrum Masters to have some form of leadership background, whether it be managing people, some sort of management, or having done some sort of management background. I think it's important to understand. Now, again, that it could swing both ways. It could be really bad to have someone in that position because they're not an effective management type, or it could be something really good to empower the team and really help build a team. So I like that sort of responsibility mindset going into the Scrum Master role, because sort of like what Jay said, you can teach somebody what the fundamentals are, but there's a characteristic that you just can't teach. I think it holds true for anything. Not everyone's a developer. Not everyone's a business analyst. Not everyone can do QA. Although that could probably be another topic of conversation. But again, I think that leadership sort of background or management background really helps, because you kind of understand people, and people management is really important. So you're not just checking boxes. You're really managing, human interaction.
Yeah, I think My fear with the by the way, this is a Kobayashi Maru. There's no answer to this question because you could be the world's best project manager and one of the world's worst Scrum Masters. You could be the world's worst BA but a great Scrum Master. So I think it's provocative. But I can say this, and not just to be contrarian, my fear with hiring a Scrum Master that has a management background is the command and control tendencies. If I was a manager before, I could tell people with my authoritative title to do things, and they do it. You can breed a very bad Scrum team culture if you have a prototypical manager in that role telling people how many points things will be and demanding people to stay late to finish a story and all that garbage that we try to get out of by just embracing this new framework.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's why I was, erring, saying that, this could either go well or go extremely poorly. I totally get that piece of it as well. I just think that, again, like Jay touched on earlier, good managers are, people don't leave companies because of the company. They usually leave because of their management. But
absolutely.
I think that it's an interesting sort of spin on things. I know when I'm interviewing Scrum Masters, I want to know heavily, around sort of their background in actually managing people, whether it's direct reports, matrix reporting, whatever you may want to call it. It's really around sort of their people and interaction, because someone that's very quiet and reserved, they might be an okay Scrum Master, but when in the thick of it, is that the person you want, pushing the team to get things done when they're really struggling? And I don't know about you guys, but I've never walked into an organization where everything's working great. I have yet. I start to think that doesn't exist, but the more people I talk to, they're like, everything. I'm like, I don't know where that is, but every time I walk into an organization, it's a complete mess.
Without going down a rabbit hole too deeply, and sorry for cutting you off,
no,
I love going into places of chaos because you can't mess those up. If you go into a well-oiled machine, the only thing I'm going to do is cause a problem.
I don't want that either. Trust me. If
it's a dumpster fire, it's going to look good.
Yeah.
Like that. And let's use an apropos example of Marissa Mayer, right? I mean, you have tons of CEO examples where they step in figuring that, this is awful, it can't get any worse, and then they make it worse. And there's the IT landscape is littered with people who have stepped into a bad situation thinking they're going to ride out on a white horse and save the day, and they do end up on the white horse, only that horse is death and they're draped over it.
Well, that wraps up the conversation pleasantly.
I had one more point, Ryan, before we wrap up.
That's cool. I just heard the white horse of death, and I figured we'd hit the warning track before running flat into the wall.
So we had this topic of hiring a Scrum Master or getting a job as a Scrum Master,
Yes.
And we were just talking about the hiring part, but what makes a good Scrum Master? Obviously, the Scrum Master has to understand the Scrum process. I mean, that's basic, right? I mean, they have to understand how it works, how to coach people, aside from, how to work with the product owner, how to work with the development team. That's fine. But it's really more about, for me, setting aside ego. At least that's my opinion. Because a lot of people, especially in the software world, people are smart, people have money, and people have egos, right? So in my opinion, a good Scrum Master is someone who does not have an ego. And what does that mean? So an interview question could be, for me, is like, okay, so let's say a developer on the team you're working with comes in Monday morning or whatever, and you see is extremely tired, right? And, what do you do? Simple question, right? I mean, there could be a lot of angles going to that, and you could start going down the 5 whys, maybe going down the whys, you realize this person maybe has a newborn kid, right? And, as a Scrum Master, what are you supposed to do in this situation? The impediment for this person is the fact that they're not going to be able to function properly because they're really tired, right? So I'm looking for a Scrum Master who's going to say, hey, I'm going to go talk to this person and ask them if they need any help with something. Can I get them some coffee? Can I run to Starbucks? Do you need to take a nap? Whatever the case, it depends on the organization, of course, right? Hey, do you maybe need to take a half day off? Whatever it is, because it's more about not so much ego. That's the point I was trying to make there.
No, it's cool. And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, sorry, Ryan. So I think you sort of we almost came full circle at this point, where again it's going back to the qualities of being the nurturing parent and being the disciplinarian. So when this particular individual keeps coming in and saying the dog ate my homework, you're going to have to almost at that point you flip the switch, and you no longer can be nurturing. You have to direct sort of in a different way and figure out sort of what the issues are and really be able to drill down. So I think that's, again, it's managing that human element that I think to me is what I look for in a good Scrum Master.
Right, and I would definitely highly respect a Scrum Master if I came, around the corner and said, "Hey, where's Ryan?" My Scrum Master said, "Look, man, he just had a baby. He was up all night. The baby is sick. I told him to go into the conference room and take 2 hours to just catch up on some shut-eye, and we're just going to cover for him in the stand-up, and we'll get it sorted out." For me personally, I would really change how I look at that Scrum Master, because that's good leadership. That's taking care of your team. That's setting a good example. That's showing that you put that work is work, but you put the person before the work. And I guarantee you that a Scrum Master who said something like that, the rest of the team would notice, and they would rally actually behind that Scrum Master, and you'd get that cohesion I was referring to earlier in the podcast. You get that cohesion a lot quicker.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give Ryan the last word on this, because it looks like literally I know I could talk about this for hours. So I don't think anyone wants to hear us talk about this for hours and hours and hours, as much as I like to hear myself talk. So Ryan, why don't you go ahead and give the last word, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up.
Well, I mean, without going too esoteric here, I think that the big things for me when we talk about what makes a good Scrum Master is somebody that embraces really the Scrum values that were added to the Scrum Guide recently. And those are just commitment, courage, focus, openness, and respect. It's easy for us to fall into the trap of just going through the motions of facilitating a project or facilitating a team, but it takes somebody special that can actually instill those values into a team and into the greater organization. And I think that's kind of what you guys were all touching on with different anecdotes there with the baby, with somebody having a new baby, or somebody that needs a nap, or somebody that has something going on outside of work. It's just finding that person that has that fire within them to take the conscious activity of becoming that leader, becoming that advocate, and using their ears much more than their mouth, which is it's a nice skill to see, and it's fun to watch when you have somebody like that in an organization. Yeah,
it's a great way to sum it up. So I want to thank you guys for doing this podcast tonight. I know this was enjoyable for me. So I want to make sure that everyone knows where to find us. So hopefully you're already a member. If not, hop on out to the Agile Uprising site and click on the Join the Coalition and check out what's being discussed. You can also follow us on Twitter at Agile Uprising. And make sure you check out the manifesto project that we're doing. We have a lot of good information, as well as other podcasts talking to the original signers of the manifesto, more coming. And again, thanks everyone. I'm not sure if anyone else has any sort of plugs they want to get in there, but if not, we can go ahead and wrap up.
I'm good on plugs, sir.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Me as well.
All right, Jerry. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.